All right, we want to talk about some war innovations that come out of World War II or come to fruition in World War II. The first is the Blitzkrieg tactic. This is one that is going to be used by the Nazis to great effect in their takeover of Europe. We're going to turn the tables on them at D-Day when Eisenhower plans his own American Blitzkrieg. But it's a military tactic, like blitz. If you know football, right? Blitz is where you send one more defender than the offense has blockers, but you have to do it really quickly. Otherwise, the quarterback can figure out who the open man is. And so a blitzkrieg in the German translates to lightning attack. There are three steps of a blitzkrieg. It starts with a bombing campaign, and this could last any number of hours or days. But the idea is you want to soften up your opponent. You're trying to keep them from getting sleep. There's also the anticipation of them knowing the attack is coming, but not knowing quite when. The second two steps happen at the same time. You attack with all your forces on one point of a line in an attempt to break through that line. Much more of even a psychological tactic than a military one. And at the same time, you're dropping paratroopers behind enemy lines that are attacking from the other direction. World War II is the first time we see paratroopers being used in action. It's a very dangerous job, being a paratrooper. Flying in on those planes, usually under enemy fire, but also, parachuting in territory that your army doesn't hold. There's an awful lot that could go wrong during that particular step. But usually what happened is people were so caught by surprise by the speed of this tactic that it was very effective at putting the enemy on their heels before they really had a chance to figure out what was going on. Like I said, Hitler will use this really to great effect, especially at the beginning of the war, this blitzkrieg tactic. One of the things that you see a lot in World War II is that planes become much more important. Obviously, in World War I, they're being used, but they're not very fast or maneuverable. Planes are going to become much more speedy, much more maneuverable as World War II hits. Probably the fastest, most maneuverable planes are the Japanese Zeros that are there. But every one of these militaries has an air force that's going to be fighting. In addition to these fighter planes, though, you've got aircraft carriers for the fighter planes to take off of, and you also have high-level bombers that will change tactics in the war. With things like the Battle of Britain, the night bombing of London that will go on by the Nazis during the early days of World War II, all the way to the eventual dropping of the atomic bombs by two American bombers. And so planes become very, very important. By the end of the war, the Germans have actually developed the jet engine, which would kind of foretell the next big step, but they didn't have the manufacturing capacity to produce them in the numbers they would have needed to make them effective in World War II. But planes will be a very important weapon. The other one here is the guided missile. And there are two types of guided missiles that are going to be used, the V1 and the V2 rocket. If you translate those from the German, it's the Versuchswaffen 1 and the Versuchswaffen 2, spelled just like it sounds. So if you're wanting to look that up, but it's probably easier to look it up as V1 and V2 rockets. One had an early guidance chip in it, or a guidance system, so they could program where it was supposed to go. They shot a lot of these across the English Channel during the time they were trying to soften up England before they had planned on invading England. Of course, they never do, but they were going to try. The other relies on it kind of comes off on a platform, an angled platform and basically they had to do the math to figure out how far it would go before it ran out of gas and then drop down. So these aren't super accurate, but they are showing us where missiles are going to go in the future. The V6 rocket, so the sixth generation of these, is actually what is going to power the U.S. space program. And so those scientists, some of them will actually be brought back to the United States, and they'll help us figure out the technology for that. But this is really the first time that you see these types of things being used in warfare. So you got three technological innovations that are going to change the way that wars are being fought.